Chief Paulette?
Yeah, we have not seen him yet.
Good evening, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Peace and blessings of God be on you. I am Malik Ajiman, and on behalf of the organizers, Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, and the town of Hay River, I want to welcome you all to the first virtual World Religions Conference in Northwest Territories. World Religions Conferences have been held in person over the last 12 years at Yellowknife and 4 years at Hay River. This year, as a result of COVID, we are holding the conference virtually, and we are extremely excited having you join the panel in discussing the need for unified response to global pandemic and the role of faith communities. In addition to the faith leaders and special guests, we also have the Chief Public Health Officer for Northwest Territories to shed light on the public health dimension. The format for the program is as follows. Event is chaired by a moderator whom I will introduce shortly. Presenters and special guests will share their perspective on the topic uninterrupted, followed by a question and answer session. You can send your questions to the moderator during the speeches using the Q&A tab, which is at the bottom of your screen. The moderator collates the questions and direct them to a specific or all the presenters. Program will be concluded with closing remarks. So I'll now introduce the moderator for this evening's function, and it's no other person than the Mayor of Hay River, Candice Jamieson. Candice Jamieson is an owner and operator of Hay River Disposal Limited and Jamieson Holdings. After graduating from Diamond Jennings High School in Hay River, Candice spent over 15 years in progressively senior roles in banking before partnering with her husband to purchase Hay River Disposal. She is passionate about education and literacy for many years. Candice has held positions on both the South Slave Regional Board and the local Hay River Board of Education. Candice has always been a strong advocate for a healthy, growing, and sustainable community, which led her to put her name forward to serve as a mayor. Now in her third term, Candice dedicates considerable time and effort to the betterment of Hay River. Ladies and gentlemen, your moderator, Mayor Candice Jamieson.
Thank you, Malik, for those kind words. And I'd like to take the opportunity for thanking the organizers for having me back as your moderator this year. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Aftab Ahmad, who will give some recitation from the Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم وميثاقه الذي وثقكم به إذ قلتم سمعنا وأطعنا واتقوا الله إن الله عليم بذات الصدور يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. Chapter 5, verse 8 to 9. I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed, in the name of Allah the gracious, the merciful. And remember Allah's favor upon you and the covenant which He made with you, when you said, we hear and we obey. And fear Allah, surely Allah knows well what is in the minds. O ye who believe, be steadfast in the cause of Allah, bearing witness in equity, and let not a people's enmity incite you to act otherwise. People's enmity incite you to act otherwise than with justice. Be always just, that is nearer to righteousness, and fear Allah. Surely Allah is aware of what you do. Jazakallah. Thanks.
Thank you. Last year was the first time I was involved in the conference, and I was really not sure what to expect. A couple of things that really stood out for me was first, how we are all truly interconnected in one form or another. The event was not only informative, it was comforting to recognize our similarities and not our differences. So I will ask that each of us listen tonight with an open mind as well as an open heart. We are doing things a little differently, but it's still exciting. We have a very exciting list of speakers tonight. We have two guest speakers, Chief Francois Paulette from Smith's Landing Treaty 8 First Nation and Mayor Rebecca Alty from Yellowknife. We have Dr. Cami Candola, Chief Public Health Officer of the Northwest Territories, who is representing a public health perspective. Mr. Paul Andrew, I'm sure you all recognize, if not his face, his voice from his many years with CBC North. He's representing an Indigenous perspective. Bishop John Hanson, who will be representing a Christian perspective, and Imam Asif Arif, representing an Islamic perspective. I want to thank you all for taking time for us tonight, and I recognize that we are all busy, especially this time of year. So I will ask that we all try and keep to the time limits that were allotted, and I'm probably over mine already, so not doing, it's all good. And finally, we will finish up with the question and answer period. And for those who aren't sure how to do that, if you swipe your cursor, there's a little taskbar that along the bottom that will pop up. And one of those icons is a Q&A. So you can put your questions in there. And if it is specific to one of our panelists, please, if that's who you would like to answer your question. If not, I will randomly select different people, or hopefully, time permitting, everybody can give us a little answer from their perspective. So with that, I'm going to ask Kaleem Ahmad to do some opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Mayor Candace. Respected moderator, Mayor Candace Jamieson, Mayor Rebecca Alty, honorable dignitaries, learned scholars, faith leaders, elders, and friends. I will take a few moments to provide a brief introduction of Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat and the World Religions Conference. The community was initiated under the divine guidance by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian in India in 1889. The Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat is an international revival movement within Islam, having members in over 200 countries. Some key Islamic teachings and concepts practiced by Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat are that all human beings are created equal, irrespective of race, color, creed, or gender. Only those are better who are more conscious of their Creator and act accordingly. However, it is God's prerogative to decide. Life is a chance to recognize the Creator. Death makes us meet our Lord and face the judgment day. Therefore, we need to be watchful of our acts in this world. Peaceful coexistence in this world is fundamental and is over and above any religious beliefs. The holy founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, may peace be on him, writes in one of his books that God has established me upon the utmost pristine principles which are beneficial to humanity. God has informed me that of religions which have spread and are firmly established in the world through prophets, holding sway over a part of the world and achieving survival and long life, none were false in their origin, nor was any of those prophets false, because it is the eternal practice of the Creator that false prophets who lie against God never prosper. The Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat categorically rejects all forms of extremism. The founder of the community, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the promised Messiah and the Mahdi, may peace be on him, declared that extremism and an aggressive jihad with the sword has no place in Islam. The best way to defend Islam is through an intellectual jihad with pen. To this end, Hazrat Ahmad, may peace be on him, penned over 80 books and thousands of letters, delivered hundreds of lectures, and engaged in scores of public debates. The motto of the community is love for all, hatred for none. The World Religions Conference is an opportunity to exchange ideas and explore topical issues in a spirit of mutual respect. This was so envisioned by the holy founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat over a century ago. We affirm the value of interfaith interactions for enriching our awareness of the divine being in this world. In Canada, these symposia and conferences are being held for over 4 decades. This is the 13th such event in the spectacular Northwest Territories. Although we miss traveling to Northwest Territories this year and seeing our friends in person, but we are happy and thankful to God that the technology has enabled us to connect again. And we look forward to an engaging and enlightening evening. With this, I conclude my presentation.
Thank you, Kaleem. Next up, we have our guest speaker, Mayor Rebecca Alty from Yellowknife. Welcome, Rebecca. I'm going to give a little bit on Rebecca. Rebecca was born and raised in Yellowknife in Chief Dry Geese Territory in the Acacho Territory. After graduating from the University of Calgary with a Bachelor of Communication Studies, Rebecca was voted or has worked for the Government of the Northwest Territories, Stanton Territorial Hospital Foundation, Havens, and the Diavik Diamond Mines. Outside work, Rebecca is an active volunteer in sports, arts, and culture. Rebecca is bilingual in French, both French and English. And one of my colleagues, welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you very much, Mayor Jameson. And good evening to everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you to the organizers for having me. And it's been a tough year, and with a pandemic, it's particularly challenging versus say a natural catastrophe where if it was a flood, we'd be able to get together and work side by side and be able to get over this together. Whereas this health pandemic really draws us apart, and it's our natural reaction to want to come together in difficult times. So I think that's one thing that's particularly challenging, is the fact that we have to stay apart to stay healthy. And as community members and faith leaders, I think it's an important time to really check in on how our community is doing, our friends, our families, giving them the calls and having these voice chats, and seeing if there is any ways that we can provide support to each other. I've been talking to residents who, you know, have been able to help others, whether it's ranging from dropping off groceries to those in need, to people have really taken it upon themselves to take advantage of our natural assets here in Yellowknife, like frozen lakes, and they're doing full skating rinks across all the lakes. And so being able to get outside and get that fresh air and create fun for their community. So it's yeah, a particularly challenging year, but I think it's really trying to find new ways to help each other that's going to help us get through this. And sure, we're all seeing the light at the end of the tunnel with good news about vaccines, but really trying to find the new way, these new norms of doing events, whether it's these Zoom events or whether instead of going inside to skate, we're choosing to get back to the older ways of doing it and taking our fresh air breaks outside. So I don't want to take up too much more of the time, but again, thanks everybody for joining, and really encourage us all to keep an eye and sharing those positive messages with one another. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Next, we have Dr. Cami Candola, who will be giving us a public health perspective on the pandemic. Dr. Cami Candola is the current Chief Public Health Officer for the Northwest Territories. She has extensive experience protecting the health of NWT residents and monitoring of public health program activities. She has served as president of the Canadian Society for Circumpolar Health and president of the NWT Medical Association. Dr. Candola graduated from McGill University in 1992, and prior to moving to Yellowknife, Dr. Candola had an extensive career as an international health consultant, working with the Government of Canada, the World Health Organization, the World Bank, and several charitable organizations working in the developing world. Welcome, Dr. Candola.
Thank you for inviting me to speak as a woman of both faith and science. I appreciate this opportunity to address the role of faith communities in the science-based fight to defeat the COVID-19 global pandemic that has taken such a horrific toll on humanity since February. Some of you know I am an active member of the Yellowknife Church of Christ. My faith community and work are deeply important to me and central to who I am. I'm also a woman of science. I'm a physician trained in family medicine, as well as a public health and preventive medicine specialist. Since moving to Yellowknife 17 years ago, my role in medicine have included Stanton Hospital Regional Medical Health Officer, and in 2018, I took the role of Chief Public Health Officer for the Northwest Territories after serving 7 years as a deputy. My service work to the medical profession includes also working as the president of the NWT Medical Association. So with feet equally planted in what I view as the complementary worlds of faith and science, I'd like to speak this evening about how we can continue to safely gather as faith communities during this COVID Christmas. By strictly adhering to evidence-based public health measures that are clearly mitigating transmission of the virus, we can prevent cluster outbreaks and protect our elders, families, and communities in all our houses of worship. First, though, I'd like to share a brief snapshot of the current state of pandemic affairs. COVID-19 activity is at an all-time high and rising at an unprecedented rate across Canada and much of the world. We know this will only accelerate over the holiday season. And in fact, models from the federal government say we could see as many as 10,000 new cases a day across the country in December. Here in the NWT, we've done our part to try to protect and contain COVID. Our total number of confirmed cases as of today is 15. All the cases have recovered. We have no known active cases in the territory at this time. Our greatest risk is that people traveling to the territory, including NWT residents, will bring the virus into our communities. All unknown cases of COVID are tied to travelers returning or entering to the NWT. And the risk of importation has never been higher, and it will only increase in the coming weeks. Christmas, cold weather, and the winter respiratory virus season are all upon us. The next few months are critical to minimizing COVID cases in the Northwest Territories, and we must be especially careful to guard against any weakening of our individual and collective resolve to adhere to good public health practices during our altered Christmas and holiday celebrations and traditions this year. So these public health measures do not single out faith-based communities, but it is important to acknowledge that many traditional practices in faith-based gatherings generate additional risk to become dangerous super spreader events. And these risk factors include mass gatherings in confined spaces. Typically, we could have about 100 people or more in one confined space, and that makes physical distancing difficult. The multi-user sharing of food and beverages, and we see that during the sharing of communion bread and wine service, or after worship fellowship and refreshments, teas, bazaars, and many, many shared meals. Song. We love to celebrate with song during worship, but we do know that respiratory droplets, especially those generated at indoor singing events, are known significant risk in the transmission of the virus. We know that most faith communities also include high-risk participants, a significant number of elders and chronically ill people. And this puts them at increased risk should there be COVID transmission in the environment. Some places of worship are in older buildings with limited entry and exit routes, poor ventilation, limited bathroom facilities, and crowded nooks and crannies, especially in renovated basements. We also know that some faith-based worships are small and have a limited budget for the enhanced environmental health cleaning that is required to keep the building clean and safe. So in the upcoming holiday season, it's a time of worship for people of all faiths and of celebration with family and friends. But this year, though, we must celebrate differently. Faith-based organizations can lead by example. We can gather as faith communities and not put our members at risk by continuing to follow simple risk mitigation rules that we've had in place since March. So one of the most fundamental ways we can protect each other is wear a mask. I wear a mask, I protect you, you wear a mask, we protect each other. Keep the crowd small and keep people at least 6 feet from each other. You can share hand sanitizer, but don't share food, drinks, or dishes. And when you're playing games and sharing items, sanitize everything that people touch. Restrict your own holiday gatherings at home within your local public health guidelines. In ours, it's a maximum of 5 people you don't live with. And we must remain vigilant to keep each other safe over the holidays. In the NWT, we are in the relaxing phase 2. So there we have a maximum of 25 people allowed for indoor settings, unless you can accommodate more. If you exceed that number, we recommend that you have the ability to also have virtual in addition to in-person religious and personal gatherings. The other aspect is to try to educate yourself and watch for symptoms. And these include, but not limited to, fever, new or worsening cough, shortness of breath or difficulty breathing, abdominal pain, skin changes or rashes, chills, muscle aches, fatigue, nausea, vomiting, loss of appetite. And so if you do have those symptoms, this is not a time to go to a faith-based gathering. It's a time to stay home and call a healthcare provider. That healthcare provider can assess you, and then you need to follow the guidance of that health professional. When you are feeling any of these symptoms, the best thing you can do for your fellow worshipers is to stay home. And if you are required to self-isolate responsibly. This is going to be a tough holiday season, and we are seeing the number of cases increase. Currently in Canada, there's about 6,500 cases daily occurring of confirmed COVID-19, and we're having about 85 deaths per day. Canada, we've reached over 400,000 cases in total. And in every jurisdiction but NWT, there is community spread. We are really recommending that this is not the time to travel outside of the territory unless it's essential, and also to avoid non-essential travel into the territory. As public health officials, we understand that many NWT residents do have family elsewhere in Canada. We also have close to 650 post-secondary students currently studying outside the territory. But we are reckoning as much as possible, we're asking people to stay put during this holiday period. With vaccines on the way, now's the time to use the technologies God gave us to connect with our loved ones while keeping everyone safe. So at work, there is a Bible passage I come back to a lot, and that's Philippians 2:4. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. So in many ways, this is what the public health measures we see across our communities are about. It's about putting the lives of others above the comforts of self. As faith communities, people do come to us for guidance. And I believe it is on us to guide our communities to these values. We can do it by leading the way in promoting safe celebration and worship. We can lead by helping fellow worshipers feel comfortable and rethinking how we celebrate and pray. And we can lead by teaching our communities how to enjoy each other's company and practice that faith while still protecting our elders, our friends, and our communities from COVID-19. As we do, we can rest assured that this will not be forever. If we take the right steps now, we can do our part to bring everything back to normal a little bit sooner. So the one request I ask everyone, for any faith, let's do this together across faiths, across professions, and across the globe. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Candola, and I know you are a busy lady, so we are honored to have you. And I thank you for all you do for our residents. It is truly appreciated. And I know how much pressure and how much work you've been doing, so very grateful. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you, Jason.
We have Mr. Paul Andrew representing the Indigenous perspective. Paul Andrew was born in the Mackenzie Mountain across from the community of Toledo. He spent his early years growing up in the bush, learning the Dene traditions and language. Paul has served the people in Toledo as their chief. He began his broadcasting career with CBC North Radio in Inuvik. He has hosted CBC North Beat since it was launched. Paul is also a well-known singer and musician. He has been honored as the NWT's Literacy Volunteer of the Year. He is a recipient of the 2017 Order of the NWT and is a student of Dene philosophy and history. He is also the recipient of the 2008 National Aboriginal Achievement Award for Media and Communications. Paul Andrew hosted several CBC specials, including the NWT elections, Arctic Winter Games, the Royal Family Visit to the North, and was honored in accepting an award on behalf of CBC at the International Sport Film Festival in Palermo, Sicily. Welcome, Paul.
Merci, thank you. And first of all, a big thank to the Common Creator for one more day. The elders always tell us that we have to express gratitude for one more day. And so I give thanks to the Creator for this opportunity, not only to talk to you and share my perspective, a perspective, not the perspective, on Indigenous look at this whole thing. As that has been mentioned already, the challenge that we have, and one of the things that the elders tell me is, how do you turn a negative into a positive? That's the challenge every time they run into a situation, an adverse situation. And Indigenous people, ever since contact, have faced a lot of adversity. But somehow we have persevered. Today, some people of Dene, people went over to one of the places, and we sang some songs. We fed the fire. Feeding fire ceremony is something that has been going on for as long back as any of us can remember. And it is to give thanks for one more day, but also to pray for the rest of the world in this particular time that we're going through. Because people know that even though we are going through some difficult times, there are people in the world who are going through worse times. And they have always talked about, our elders have always talked about, to keep things into perspective. And that, yes, it is tough times, but we are doing better than other people. And that's why we have to pray for them. And it is very possible, the elders say, that somebody on the other side of the world is also praying for us too. And so one of the things that they always have told us, the elders have always told us, is that you got to take care of yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. And you can't do that in isolation. And that's one of the things that makes this particular times more difficult. Because if you're thinking about yourself, you're not thinking about other people. If you're praying for yourself, you're not thinking about other people. And what the elders have always told us is that this is not about you, but it is about everybody else. And how do you help them? Some of the toughest times that I've gone through this particular time is funerals. Probably everybody knows that funerals are special. The end of a journey is special. And you want to say to the person who's gone on a new journey, thank you. You want to say to this person, thank you for your life, your wisdom, your stories, your songs. And you want to say that with his or her family, and you cannot do that. And that makes it particularly difficult to do. But one of the things that the elders have always told us is that one of the things that we have always done, they said, is humor. In every situation, try to find humor. What humor does, they said, is that pulls people back into the circle. We are all in a circle. And anytime somebody leaves that circle, either mentally, emotionally, physically, or spiritually, our job as members of in that circle is to bring that individual back. And one of the ways that they always have told us is through humor. We had that feeding fire ceremony today, and I know that there's other places within Dene in the Northwest Territories where people are also praying for the rest of people in the rest of the world, because they know that everybody's going through it. They have always told us that concentrate on today. Today. Yes, there might be a vaccine that will help us. Yes, we might beat this. But today, what is it like for the old people? The ones that are lonely, what is it like for them? Before the pandemic, I used to go to the seniors' house and I used to play guitar for them and sing songs for them. And I used to say that I would get more out of doing that for them than they because I enjoyed so much to see the smile on their face and to see them tapping their feet. I've always enjoyed that, but I couldn't do that anymore. And that makes it tough for me. But like the elders say, don't think about yourself. How are you going to make the elders that is alone thinking about their grandchildren? How is it we're going to make them feel better? And so some of the things that we try to do, phone calls, and give them music that they can hear, maybe through situations like this. And that is the kind of stuff. The thing that the elders have always told me is that we have more in common than divides us. And we have to concentrate on those things, those commonalities, than on the divisions. And when we do that, they have always said, we have persevered in these difficult times. We must build on that commonality. We must concentrate on that commonality. They also have told us to concentrate on the adversity. And in this particular case, it's real. What is happening is real. What is happening is that all of us are feeling the pain. And that's what unites us, they tell us. The elders tell us. It's not how well we're doing against the virus. It is how it is uniting us in pain and the human suffering that goes with it. And that's what we have to concentrate on, they tell us. They also tell us that we always have to be open to new ideas and accept differences and look for solutions in those things. Elders have always said for us that we have to accept our limitations, but accept the challenge and change the behavior, so that what I have learned about myself during this particular time is that I need more help and more work on my mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical life. And one of the things that adversity does for the Dene that I know is that it shows you the kind of person that you are. How you respond to any kind of adversity shows you the kind of person that you are. It makes you look at yourself in the mirror. And they ask us, do you like what you see in the mirror? And one of the things that they have always told us is that if we're open, we learn from other people and we learn how to deal with that. We learn to smile. We learn, despite the problems that we have, that yes, we are doing better than other people. So the question that they keep asking me is, how do we take a negative and turn it into a positive? Drum songs. It's Ullah. I don't know if it puts a smile on your face. I know it does that for me. And I know it lifts my heart. And I know that when I see a Dene, and when I sing those songs, I know it makes them smile. And during these particular times, that's one of the things that I try to concentrate on more than anything else, is trying to see if I can make a little child smile, or an elder, give them hope, or somebody who's struggling, a little smile. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Always a pleasure listening. At this time, I'd like to remind everybody that we will be having a question and answer period at the end. If you can click on the little icon at the bottom, there's a Q&A icon that you can put your questions in, and I will ensure that they are answered, time permitting, and we seem to be keeping on track here. So I thank you all. So next up, we have Bishop John Hanson, who is going to give us a Christian perspective on the virus. Bishop John Hanson is the 7th Bishop of Mackenzie Fort Smith, born in 1967 in Edmonton. He obtained a diploma in building construction engineering from NAIT. and a BA from the University of Alberta. He joined the Congregation of the Most Holy Redeemer, the Redemptorists, professing religious vows in 1998. He did his Master of Divinity in 2003 from the University of St. Michael's College. In 2009, he became pastor of St. Mary's Parish in Saskatoon, during which time he worked with refugee settlement, social justice, and Diocesan Commission for Truth and Reconciliation. In 2015, he accepted an appointment from Bishop Mark Hagman to serve as pastor of Our Lady of Victory Parish in Inuvik. On December 15, 2017, Pope Francis named him the 7th Bishop of the Diocese of Mackenzie Fort Smith. Welcome, Bishop Hansen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Jamieson. And thank you for this opportunity to share from my faith tradition. I'm a Roman Catholic bishop, so I cannot profess to speak on behalf of all Christians, but only my little corner of the Christian world. When it comes to the pandemic, I'm sure that much of what I have to share is very similar to what has been said already and what I believe is felt by people of goodwill generally, because our response to the pandemic does not call for dogmatic religious statements or sophisticated theological understanding. The pandemic is a direct assault on our human condition, and therefore it requires a human response, which we can share regardless of our beliefs. That being said, I will try to offer some thoughts that I believe may contribute to a unified response to the pandemic and the particular faith perspective that lies behind them, and how I as a bishop try to lead the Catholics in my diocese for whom I'm being called to be a shepherd. I'm going to break my response into 4 main themes, and the first is the dignity of life. As Catholic Christians, we believe that we are created in the image and likeness of God. And therefore, we Catholics admit that there is a hierarchy of values and that the protection of human life is at the top of that hierarchy. This is a stance that can be controversial in regard to some areas of our teaching. But in response to the pandemic, I think it would be safe to say that we would be with most people when we say that we do not want to see people die from COVID-19. So for this reason, we would argue that the protection of life during the time of pandemic must supersede all other considerations. Now, what this means concretely is, of course, not entirely clear-cut. We know that during stressful times, when social norms are disrupted, when businesses are shut down and unemployment rises, when the fabric of life as we know it is torn apart, life comes under threat from more than just a virus. Many social factors come into play and are accentuated. Addiction, domestic abuse, depression, suicide. These and others are all factors that increase during these difficult times. So it is here, I believe, that people of faith can play a most important role. While we rightfully laud the expertise of scientists, researchers, medical professionals, and frontline workers for the important work that they're doing in treating the virus, caring for patients, and God willing, providing a prevention and cure. And while we put our trust in political leaders to implement the social practices that are recommended by health professionals to slow the spread of the virus, we as leaders and people of faith have 2 important tasks. We are first called as individuals to adhere to those practices that experts and elected and appointed leaders have laid out for us. It is so important that we lay aside our egos and our pride and to set a good example by doing our very best to follow the healthcare and social directives that are before us. We can certainly raise our questions at appropriate times and in appropriate venues, but we know that to submit to appropriate authorities in a time of national crisis is not an abdication of our personal rights and freedoms, but rather it's an important exercise of our personal responsibility that is necessary for living in a free society. And it's an act of faith, because we do not know everything. We cannot be expected to know everything. We place our faith in God, and we also give assent to those people who have specific expertise and responsibilities in society meant for the good of all. Second, we are called to be on the front lines, to intervene, to lessen, and to help cope with the inevitable fallout that comes as a result of those social practices. As faith leaders, we are the ones to encourage our congregations to reach out to those who are facing desperate times. We will look after the food banks. We will call the housebound. We will do grocery runs for those in isolation. We will pray for the sick, and we will bury the dead. These are what we would call the corporal works of mercy. We do know that there will be casualties, but if we pull together, we can help to minimize those who succumb to the social fallout of the pandemic and ease the strain of the measures that we must undertake to minimize the physical impact of the virus itself. The second theme is the dignity of work. One of the areas hardest hit by the pandemic in our society has been small business and wage earners who have taken an enormous share of the brunt of the protective social measures. Despite government programs set up to help over the short term, it is clear that many business owners will not reopen their doors. Many people who have lost their employment will face financial hardship that will take years to overcome. This is no small thing, and the anger and frustration that ensues with such loss is justified and understandable. Now, economics is certainly not my field, and I would not presume to offer a remedy to the terrible consequence of the pandemic, but I would like to offer this. In Catholic social teaching, we have an important social teaching called the principle of subsidiarity. Simply put, this principle says that what we can do locally should not be given over to a higher authority. Usually this refers to laws and governance, but I would like to talk about shopping. As small business owners and employees suffer, I think that it would be very Christian, a very good human thing to do to support our local business community at this time. It has become very convenient to shop online and to spend our money far abroad while neglecting those who are trying to make a living right here in our own communities. I do not begrudge Mr. Bezos for his hard-earned success with Amazon, but I think our local businesses deserve our support. They have been bending over backwards trying to adapt to the restrictions in place. And showing our appreciation as we do our Christmas shopping this year is the least we can do and may have a positive effect in the lives of many who are struggling. The next theme is that of the importance of solidarity, which I've heard spoken about already. One of the Christian values that we share, and of course it's not just Christian, is that we are all in this together. We saw what happened early on in the pandemic when it became an everyone for themselves approach. The grocery stores emptied of necessary items, which were either hoarded or exploited for profit. It was a valuable lesson to us of how quickly human behavior can dissolve into a base level, which could quickly bring an end to what we consider civilization as we know it. People of faith bring to the table a practice and belief that we are all better if we do things together and care about others as much as we care about ourselves. And the best measure of how we're doing is by how well we look after the most vulnerable among us. This is of particular concern for us here in the North, where our communities are underserved by health facilities, where housing tends to be overcrowded. We know from experience that the virus preys unfairly on the poor, those without adequate health care, and to experience other social factors that increase mortality rates. It might seem counterintuitive to put life on hold for the majority in order to care for a minority who are at risk, but it is precisely this approach that has allowed us to progress as human beings. Natural calamities such as the pandemic can tear us apart, or they can serve as a reminder to us that we do better when we work together and make sacrifices for those who do not necessarily or are not necessarily able to fend for themselves. The current crisis, says Pope Francis, my boss, is helping us to see that the good of each person individually is tied up with the common good of society as a whole, and vice versa. He goes on to say that a virus does not recognize barriers, borders, or cultural or political distinctions. It must be faced with a love without barriers, borders, or distinctions. If we fail to do this, we may get through the virus, but all those factors that are accentuated during this difficult times will remain behind. This is the time for us to change as a society. As people of faith, we can lead the way. And so I finish with the final theme of faith, the importance of faith. The most important thing that we can offer as people of faith is faith itself, our hope that there will be a brighter tomorrow, and that the measures we take today, even if they're difficult and painful, are not in vain. One of my favorite passages of scripture that we hear in our liturgy at this time of the year comes from the prophet Isaiah. The prophet speaks on behalf of a people who are far from home, who are losing hope in the future. Isaiah cries out, and in faith, he demands of God, "Oh, that you would tear open the heavens and come down to show your face once again. And like a lit fire boils a kettle of water." Isaiah has the faith to lift his voice to God even when everyone else seems to have forgotten. As people of faith, I believe we can be prophetic by holding on to hope even when times are trying. Because hope is contagious. It's an antidote to despair, to cynicism, and to selfishness. When people have hope in the future, we see the best side of them. Our churches have sacrificed with closures early on and now with minimum physical attendance. Because of the border rules and isolation protocols, we will have few priests to help us celebrate Christmas this year. But our spirit remains strong. Our faith is about more than a building. It's our lifeblood which enlivens us, and it pulses through our communities. Christians everywhere are in the midst of the season of Advent, the 4 weeks of preparation leading up to Christmas. It's a time of prayer and waiting and hope. So this year, as we wait for an end to the pandemic, my prayer is that our faith and hope will sustain us, that it will help us do what we need to do in order to stay safe and healthy until such a time that we can look back on this plague as something we were able to get through together and which made us stronger as people and as a community. So thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts and the opportunity to learn from all of you.
Thank you, Bishop Hanson. And with that, we are moving on to Imam Asif Arif, and he will be giving an Islamic perspective tonight. Imam Asif is currently serving, oh my goodness, if I blow this, please forgive me, Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat in Calgary. Asif was raised in Calgary and completed his schooling in Calgary. After graduating from high school, he dedicated his life and sought admission in the Ahmadiyya Muslim Missionary Training College in Toronto. After completing the 7-year course, he was opportune to serve in the Fiji Islands from 2014 to 2018 and is now rendering his service in Calgary. He is married and has 2 children. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Jameson. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the gracious, ever merciful. To my distinguished panelists and the viewers watching this program at home, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May peace, blessings, and the mercy of Allah be upon you all. Owing to the coronavirus pandemic, everyone in the world is anxious. The reality of the matter is that nothing can be understood of what is happening to the world. But the Holy Quran speaks of the conditions of the time in which we live. The Holy Quran states, وَقَالَ الْإِنسَانُ مَا لَهَا, and man says, what is the matter with her? My religion, Islam, presents a complete code of life, and it guides me at every junction of life and teaches me to live a balanced life. Details of Quranic teachings and those of the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, about pandemics and illnesses have been highlighted on several occasions by His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmad, the Caliph and worldwide head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat. The importance of good hygiene has been stressed in the Quran. We read in chapter 2, verse 223, indeed, Allah loves those who turn to Him repenting, and He loves those who keep themselves clean and pure. Over 1400 years ago, the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, advised quarantine. And he even spoke of social distancing, saying that do not place a sick patient with a healthy person. The founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the promised Messiah, peace be upon him, during the plague outbreak in India, advised his Jamaat members to take precautionary measures. He said that along with prayer, also utilize the practical means and resources that are available. In other words, fully and comprehensively adopt all precautionary measures. All these highlighted teachings of Islam tie in with the fundamental teaching of Islam that we are obligated to fulfill the rights of God as well as the rights of our fellow human beings. When we adhere to the precautionary measures highlighted by local authorities, we do so in an effort to fulfill each other's rights, to ensure peace throughout society and the world at large. During this global pandemic, what has become all too apparent is how godlessness is on the rise. This precarious situation should be a cause for us to turn to our Creator with greater zeal and passion and fulfill His rights by worshiping Him wholeheartedly. We are also witnessing how relations on all levels of society have become strained. We see an utter lack of unity amongst nations, and tensions are on the rise. A sense of anxiety rests in the hearts of everyone as to what the future may hold. Divisions are growing deeper. There is a lack of justice, and peace seems to be a distant reality. During the pandemic, His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad wrote to certain world leaders, in which he warned them in the words of the promised Messiah Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, upon whom be peace, that such calamities strike the world due to the grave injustices being carried out. Thus, true justice must be established. Hence, this is our role as faith and community leaders to follow in this excellent example and encourage and guide society towards justice and unity. The world must realize that if it continues to move away from God, then it will only result in their ruin. Thus, we must continue our efforts of helping the world in recognizing the unity of God. The reality of the matter is that we all yearn for justice at every level of society, from the grassroots all the way up to the international stage. We have to realize that peace and justice are inseparable. You cannot have one without the other. Certainly, this principle is something that all wise and intelligent people understand. We should all remember that human knowledge is not perfect, and at times our decisions lead to unjust outcomes. God's law, however, is perfect. His law is based entirely on justice. The day the people of the world come to recognize and understand this crucial point will be the day that the foundation for true and everlasting peace will be laid. What does Islam say in relation to international relations that are based on justice and are a means of establishing peace? In the Holy Quran, God Almighty has made it clear that whilst our nationalities or ethnic backgrounds act as a means of identity, they do not entitle or validate any form of superiority of any kind. Islam teaches absolute justice and equality in all matters, and so we find another very crucial guideline in chapter 5, verse 3 of the Holy Quran. In this verse, it states that to fully comply with the requirements of justice, it is necessary to treat even those people who go beyond all limits in their hatred and enmity with fairness and equity. The Quran teaches that wherever and whoever counsels you towards goodness and virtue, you should accept it. And wherever and whoever counsels you towards sinful or unjust behavior, you should reject it. Another beautiful teaching of peace presented by the Holy Quran is, and good and evil are not alike. Repel evil with that which is best. And lo, he between whom and thyself was enmity will become as though he were a warm friend. Thus, the Quran teaches that as far as possible, any enmities or grudges should be reconciled and solved by opening the channels of communication and dialogue. We all have an individual responsibility to bend the curve of rising infections of COVID-19 by adhering to the public health guidelines. Faith communities can play a vital role in educating their members, which will in turn create a safer, healthier, and peaceful society for us all. This is only possible through personal sacrifice for collective benefit, a deeply fundamental Islamic tenet. His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad has been constantly guiding the members of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat to adhere to the government and public health guidelines for the safety of all by putting others before and above yourself. His Holiness states, regrettably, the sad truth remains that instead of elevating our standard of love and compassion, the opposite is proving true. Selfishness, greed, and a culture of me is prevailing across the world and across society. Thus, I pray with all my heart that mankind forsakes greed and forgoes the pursuit of narrow self-interests and instead comes to recognize the importance of protecting all of humanity and of showing kindness, compassion, and love to God's creation. I pray that a spirit of service to humanity takes permanent root in society so that we protect our future and leave behind a better world for our children and coming generations to live in. This must be our example. By lifting our congregations and our communities to this standard, we will be able to save many a generation. The world has become a global village, and so a lack of mutual respect and a failure to act in the current circumstances will result in devastating consequences. Unfortunately, we are seeing the devastation this is causing before our very eyes. So if during this pandemic, we are truly in this together, then we have to adhere to these principles of absolute justice to ensure peace at all levels of society. During this pandemic, we need to unite and not continue to grow deeper divisions. It is for this reason that the Ahmadiyya Muslim community emphasizes to all people the critical need of fulfilling the rights of God and his creation and of establishing the very best standards of justice. His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad has spoken openly and extensively about the need for unison and kindness during this pandemic. During your Friday sermon delivered in March of 2020, after emphasizing the significance of the precautionary measures that should be adopted, His Holiness said, "The ultimate tool we have at our disposal is that of prayer. We should all pray for the entire world, that God the Almighty may save mankind from the harmful effects of this virus. So may God the Almighty enable all of us to fulfill our responsibilities in this regard. May God enable us to strive for the unification of mankind, and may God safeguard all of humanity from this pandemic." With these words, I would like to once again thank all of our viewers for joining us today in this virtual event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Iman. Very informative. Okay, now, so the next part of the program would be the question and answer session. And I believe we're a little bit ahead of schedule. So I'm going to, the first one is, and I'm going to, for all participants, is the present epidemic natural phenomenon or wrath of God? And I will start with Bishop Hanson.
Well, from my tradition, I think wrath of God, especially when it comes to a natural phenomena like a virus, is something that people used to use when they did not understand what was happening. With our modern understanding of science, I'm not sure that I would put a virus in the category of wrath of God, but what something like a virus or a pandemic does is, as the Imam Arif was saying, is that it highlights discordance within our society. We know that we recognize that the virus strikes among the poor more than among the rich. We see it raise the inequalities among our availability of healthcare in our communities. So I think the virus has a very important spiritual message for us as much as it does a physical one, in that it highlights some things that we really need to work on as a community, as a society. And I think these things are God-given in a sense that it opens our eyes and we can begin to make changes if we're ready to move in that direction.
Thank you. Next, let's go with Mr. Paul Andrew.
Masi, one of the things that the elders tell us, and this is from the 20s and 30s, is that this kind of, and it could be this one, that they had prophesized that we'll go through some tough times. And part of our job as Dene, who received these prophecies, we can't change it, but we could change our ways so that we can meet these challenges, these adverse reactions that we have. And I think that's the thing. And I think that some of the stuff that Bishop was talking about is that now it is here. And for a lot of Dene, what they have talked about and continue to talk about is that, what does it mean? What does it mean to us? What does it mean to us as individuals? And in that sense, maybe it is the Creator saying, look at your ways, look at the ways that you're living, and treating and each other. But I think we're still in that debate as to whether this is the prophecies that was talked about from some of the people. One of the things that the Dene have always really believed, that these prophecies, when they do happen, everything else that they have predicted has happened to this point. So there's no reason not to believe that these prophecies are part of it. So, but the question for me is that, how did we prepare for it? We knew the prophecies was coming. We knew that. So how did the Dene get ready for it? And I think that's the question that we ask ourselves on a regular basis, is that, yes, we knew it's going to happen. Just like they said, you're going to lose your children to another society. They're going to lose their language. They're going to lose their ways of life, the way we lived on the land, the way we pray, etc., etc. Again, that was a challenge for us to get ready for these kind of things that they told us was going to happen. And one of the things that has become really clear that is for me is that we see, as has been mentioned already, how either the best or the worst in us have come out during the pandemic. And it has told us very clearly the kind of society that we have. And now the question is, do we want to continue that road? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew. And Iman Arif, if you would be the next up.
Thank you, Mayor Jameson, for the question. It is not for us to categorize a pandemic as a wrath of God. And His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad has also mentioned that it's wrong for us to categorize this as a wrath of God or a punishment of God. But I would like to say that God has put into place His spiritual laws and His physical laws. And whenever those laws are offset, there are bound to be negative and adverse effects. So this pandemic is a byproduct of how we have engaged with each other as human beings and with the society. For example, this pandemic has taught us that we have to be more vigilant about our hygiene. We have to be more vigilant about how we interact with one another. So this is a byproduct of our interactions with not only ourselves, but with our environment.
Thank you. I'm just looking up the next question. So I guess some of them are comments, so I will read them. I really enjoyed the program. Do any of the panelists have any experiences concerning COVID-19 that demonstrate a silver lining, some kind of positive that has arisen because of the new social normals? And I am gonna make a comment here because I know personally, seeing people spending more time with their children, the world slowed down, let's be honest. Slowed down for some of us. Dr. Candola probably would not feel the same. However, it is, you're seeing people spend more time with their children, with their families, outside, where we really do connect with the universe, enjoying everything that she offers us. So I think that, to me, that's a really big silver lining, seeing my community come together, which they really have, and part of that being the faith communities. They have really supported me, I know, in my role as mayor and as we continue through this pandemic. But I do believe we need to focus on the positive, and maybe it is a correction, right? I mean, COVID is the great equalizer. It does not, no one is immune, and it does not, it doesn't pick sides, that's for sure. We're all at risk. So I think that, it is a time to reflect. I think it's given parents an ability to slow down and see you know, we get going to work and then we're at school functions and then you've got to go to hockey. And then, you know, we have very little time for that family unit that most of us probably grew up with. We spent a ton of time with our parents. And I've noticed it in my family now as a grandma, you know, that coming together is so important, and slowing down and just breathing and enjoying everything that Mother Earth offers us is a huge one. So that's just my perspective, and I'm going to go. We'll start with Iman Arif first. You're back.
Thank you. It has made us more tech savvy. I mean, I never knew how to use Zoom before, so that's a plus point. But what it has taught us, especially, is that life is very frail, and we have to give the rights owed to God by worshiping God, and we have to, you know, give each other our rights. We cannot have this selfish agenda of, you know, my rights first and then everybody else. We have to look at each other's rights, and we have to, you know, strive to build a more peaceful and united society.
Absolutely. Thank you. Mr. Andrew.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things that I mentioned earlier was how the Dene, I know, are feeding the fire ceremonies for people around the world. And I know that the Dene think about people around the world when they pray all the time. They don't necessarily always pray for themselves or their families, but I think that has happened more and more. And I think they have always known that no matter how tough life has been to them, no matter what adversity they're facing, that there are people out there going through worse. And I think this particular time, some of the people that I've talked to have always tried to remind me that no matter how tough I think my life is, that there are other people going through worse. And for me, and then the other thing that I think has happened with some of the Dene that I talked to, one of the things that our elders always talk about is that, are you being the best Dene possible? Are you being the best Dene? And I think this has given us an opportunity to try to answer that question, at least to ourselves, is this the best that we could be? Is this the best that we are? Some of the very basic teachings of the Dene, are we living up to that? The importance of drum dances, the importance of hand games, the importance of being out on the land. And I know that more and more Dene are spending a lot of time out on the land, because that's where their connection to history, to spirituality happens. And I really do believe that one of the silver lining in this has been that the Dene are beginning to really have a look at themselves spiritually and saying, is this the best I could do? And are we teaching our children? And some of the things that Mayor talked about, because one of the things that has happened is that a lot of the Dene, because they cannot do the things they want to do in the communities, a lot of them are going out on the land and they're taking their children out there. And then they can't go to then they can't go get there. They speak to them in their languages. So those are some of the silver linings, you know. And on a personal basis, I spend a lot of time outside. I can't stay inside all the time. And it really has been magical for me, because anybody who walks knows that walking is good for you, not only mentally, physically, but spiritually. For me to be out there and see some of the people that you're talking about, Mayor, some of those kids out there, some of those old people that are still walking and they're saying hello, and people that may have not said hello normally in the good old days know that some of the stuff that we're going through is tough. So they're beginning to say hello to each other. And for me, that's magical. It's a reminder that I think this pandemic has reminded us that we're humans and that we have to share our humanity.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely agree. Bishop Hanson.
Before I share my silver lining, I think I need to acknowledge something that Mr. Andrew said earlier about what the hardest part for me as a bishop over these last months was the not being able to celebrate funerals in a proper way, and to see people grieving and not be able to have a traditional outlet for that we've been used to. But what that has led to is a very creative springing forth of new ideas and new ways of celebrating together, of grieving together, that doesn't necessarily reflect what we've always done. Just one example, an elder passed away in one of the communities, and there was a procession of vehicles that drove by the house of those who were grieving, and car after car after car would drive by and looking through the windows at each other just to let them know that they weren't alone. Many of our missionaries have shared experiences of breaking out the old radio broadcast programs. We can't be in church together, but we can share messages of hope and good news over the radio. And in this way, we've been able to actually reach many more people than we normally would have. And the feedback has been tremendous. People are really appreciative of hearing, a word of good news in the midst of their workday on the radio. These and many other examples have been positive outpourings because of the pandemic. So grateful for those blessings.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, we got some little bit more time for some more questions. Okay, so this one is due to COVID-19 pandemic, how can faith leaders guide the people to seek protection from future diseases or pandemics? Who would like to take that one?
I can take it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Jameson. As I've highlighted in my remarks, it is the responsibility of faith leaders to educate their communities. And that's exactly what His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmad has been doing from the very beginning of this pandemic. And so we can play a vital role in educating our community that we owe it to ourselves that we follow the health protocols laid out by the government and the public health authorities, because this is a service that we will be owing to ourselves. This is how we can give back to the community. I remember in Calgary a few days ago, there was an anti-mask protest. And we learned from that protest that religious communities, faith communities can play a vital role in educating their members about how we can protect ourselves and how we can bend the curve. So we owe it to ourselves. And the other thing that we have to do is we have to give the rights of God, and that's worship God. In doing so, we'll be worshiping God and looking after each other. And this is how we can slow the spread of this deadly virus.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to grab another one here. It says, and I'll give this to Bishop Hanson, isn't all the diseases, floods, pandemics, and people killed written in scriptures of the Bible? Sounds like what we read in the scriptures are coming to our world.
Well, this was sort of addressed, I think, in the first question. We believe, Christians believe in a loving God, and that the understanding of those who wrote those scriptures to which you referred, it's an understanding of God at work in the world, but perhaps not the way that we would look at it today. I think all of these things are opportunities for us to check ourselves, to see what course we're walking with, how we respond to natural calamities, to injustice in the world, to all of the things that we would say are chalk it all up under evil. How we respond to evil really is a way of seeing how we are walking together as people in the world. I think to put it all on God's shoulders is a bit of a disservice, both to God and to ourselves, if we absolve ourselves of the responsibility of checking our ways and seeing what we can do to respond as human beings. We've been given wisdom, and so we respond the best that we can with God's help. Hope that answers the question somewhat.
I think it does. Thank you. We are at our time limit on questions, but I just wanted to share something. And from my experience when I was on the education board and over the years, I've been in many workshops and many conferences. And something that really stood out for me back then was a lady that did a presentation, and it was on motivation and especially in children. And she had found, doing numerous studies, that children from birth to age 3 naturally help. It's instinctual for us to help each other, right? And if you now, since I've listened to her talk, I watch it, and it's so true. And then there comes a point where we change that, and she directly correlated that to, hey, if you stay in school and do well, you'll get more money, have a good job. There's a carrot at the end of the for whatever you're looking for. So basically bribing your children, right? And we've all done it, I'm sure. So, and it was interesting because the minute that there is no bribery in it, the minute that you help each other or someone else, you feed your soul, right? It makes us feel good about ourselves. So I think that has always stuck in my mind, that now more than ever, we need to feed our souls. We need to help each other. We need to work together. And that's how we succeed. And that is a common thing that I heard again tonight. And again, I walk away from this feeling amazing about the connection we have with each other. And I hope that you walk away and that we feed our soul, that we help each other through this, that we hold each other's hands and we walk together. So with that, I am going to pass it over to Abdul Bari, and he will do the concluding remarks for us. And once again, I thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I know that I've slaughtered some of these names, no disrespect intended at all. I totally enjoyed my time with all of you, and I wish you safe. I wish you all peace, love, joy, gratitude, all that good stuff. So take care and thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you listen to me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to be in this conference. All speakers delivered very inspiring speeches. I, on behalf of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, thank all of you who spared your precious time and listened to the valuable speeches. Special thanks to the moderator, Her Worship Mayor Candace Jameson, and all the speakers tonight, Her Worship Mayor Rebecca Alty, Dr. Kami Kandola, Paul Andrew, Reverend Bishop John Henson, Francois Paule, and Imam Asif Arif. May God bless you all. Traditionally, whenever we end the meetings or events, we conclude with a silent prayer. I will now lead the silent prayer just for 30 seconds. Everyone may join us, they wish. Thank you very much. Raise your hand, please, and pray silent prayer, please. Ameen. Thanks, all of you.